Admiral Vexter stood on the command deck of the Dominion flagship, his 4 eyes scanning the data screens with growing confusion. The Kelari had conquered 17 star systems in the past 100 cycles. Their war protocols were perfect. Their strategies had been refined over 10,000 years of galactic warfare. Every species they encountered fell to the same patterns. First came the terror strikes on civilian centers. This always broke the enemy's will to fight. Then came the systematic destruction of military bases, followed by ground invasions with overwhelming force. Finally, the survivors would surrender, and the Kelari would add another world to their empire. It had worked against the peaceful Novari. It had crushed the warrior clans of the Dreth. Even the ancient Silics with their advanced technology had fallen when their morale collapsed after the first attacks on their homeworld. The Kelari had never failed. Their protocols were absolute. But now, looking at the blue-green planet called Earth on his screens, Admiral Vexter felt something he had never experienced before: uncertainty. "Admiral," said his tactical officer, Krensal, "the humans are not responding as expected." "Show me," Vexter commanded. The main screen changed to show footage from 3 days ago. Kelari strike ships had descended on a human city called Tokyo. They had destroyed buildings, killed thousands, and broadcast threats across all communication channels. According to every war model the Kelari had ever developed, this should have triggered mass panic, government collapse, and desperate attempts at negotiation. Instead, something strange had happened. Within hours, humans from all over the planet had begun sending messages. Not messages of surrender, not pleas for mercy. They were sending jokes. Memes, the humans called them. Pictures of Kelari soldiers with silly captions. Videos of humans pretending to be aliens and falling over. Songs mocking the Dominion. One image showed a Kelari warrior with a pink bow drawn on his head and words that translated to "try harder, space bugs." "They are laughing at us," Krensal said, his voice filled with disbelief. "We killed 50,000 of their kind and they respond with humor." Vexter's mandibles clicked in confusion. "This makes no sense. Our psychological warfare protocols clearly state that terror attacks create submission. Every species we have encountered. The humans are not like other species, Admiral." The voice came from the doorway. Vexter turned to see Scholar Yemril, the fleet's expert on primitive civilizations. She walked slowly into the command center, her ancient body supported by a hovering chair. Her eyes were bright with concern. "Explain," Vexter demanded. Yemril activated a small projector. Images of human history appeared in the air. Burning cities, massive wars, weapons that could destroy entire regions, bodies piled in trenches, mushroom clouds rising over flattened landscapes. "The humans have been killing each other for their entire existence," she said. "They have experienced more war, more death, more destruction than any species we have ever encountered. Our terror attacks are nothing new to them. They have done worse to each other." "That should make them easier to break," Krensal argued. "A species tired of war should surrender quickly." "No," Yemril said softly. "It has made them immune. They have developed something we did not expect. They call it resilience. When we attack them, they do not break. They bend and then they push back. In their history, the more their enemies tried to crush them, the harder they fought. Cities bombed flat were rebuilt. Nations destroyed were reformed. They do not know how to give up." Admiral Vexter studied the scholar for a long moment. "What do you recommend?" "I recommend caution, Admiral. Our standard protocols may not work here. We should study them further before continuing." But Vexter did not become an admiral by being cautious. He had built his career on following the protocols that had never failed. The Supreme Commander expected results, not excuses about unusual enemy behavior. "We will proceed with Phase 2, he announced. "Military target destruction. Once their defenses are gone, they will have no choice but to submit." Yemril shook her old head sadly but said nothing more. She had given her warning. Now she could only watch. The Kelari fleet moved into position around Earth. 300 warships, each capable of destroying a city in minutes. They had identified every major military base on the planet through weeks of scanning. The attack would be swift and absolute. Within one rotation cycle, Earth would have no organized military left. What they did not know was that Earth's defenders had been watching and learning. General Sarah Chen stood in the underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains. She was a small woman with gray hair and hard eyes that had seen too much death. She had fought in 3 wars on Earth before the aliens came. Now she faced the greatest battle humanity had ever known, and she was determined that humanity would survive it. "Report," she said calmly. "The alien fleet is moving into attack position," said Colonel James Wright. "They're targeting our military installations. Standard first strike pattern, very organized, very predictable." Chen nodded. "Just like we predicted, they're following their playbook exactly." "Ma'am, with respect, how did we know they would do this?" Chen allowed herself a small smile. "Because they're winning, Colonel, and winners become predictable. They do what worked before. They follow their protocols because their protocols have always succeeded. They don't adapt because they've never had to." She turned to face her staff, all of them looking at her with trust and fear in equal measure. "But we adapt. That's what humans do. We change, we improvise, and we never ever give up." "What are your orders, General?" "Execute Operation Chaos." Across the planet, orders went out to military units hidden in places the Kelari had never thought to look. In mountain caves covered by forest, in deep ocean bunkers beneath the waves, in abandoned subway tunnels under destroyed cities, in ordinary farms and factories that looked completely innocent from orbit. The humans had not kept their military in obvious bases. They had watched the Kelari attack Tokyo. They had seen how the aliens targeted anything that looked military. So they had scattered their forces, hidden their weapons, and prepared a surprise. The Kelari began their attack at 600 hours Earth time. Their plasma weapons rained down on military installations across the globe. Bases in America, China, Russia, Europe, and Africa were reduced to smoking craters. Missiles struck, energy beams carved through concrete and steel, and explosions lit up the morning sky. In their command ships, Kelari officers celebrated. Phase 2 was complete. The humans had no military left. Victory was assured. But as the smoke cleared, something unexpected happened. From hidden positions across the Earth, missiles launched into the sky, not from the destroyed bases, from civilian trucks parked in shopping centers, from fishing boats floating in harbors, from ordinary buildings that had been secretly converted into launch sites, from holes in the ground that scanners had dismissed as natural formations. Thousands of weapons, hidden among the human population, fired at the Kelari fleet. Admiral Vexter watched in shock as 40 of his ships were destroyed in the first wave. Fire blossomed across his display screen as vessel after vessel reported damage or destruction. "Where did those come from?" he demanded. "Our scans showed no weapons in those locations." "The humans hid them, Admiral," Crenshaw reported, his voice shaking. "They put their weapons in places we would never look, among their civilians, in their homes and businesses, in their schools and hospitals. That violates every protocol of civilized warfare. Military assets must be clearly marked and separated from civilian populations." "The humans do not follow our protocols, Admiral. They never signed any agreement with us. They make their own rules." More missiles came, and more. The humans had spent the last 3 days not panicking, not crying, not surrendering. They had been moving weapons, digging tunnels, preparing false targets, and getting ready for this moment. The Kelari fleet pulled back, regrouping in high orbit. They had lost 60 ships. It was the worst single defeat in Dominion history. Never had so many Kelari vessels been destroyed in one engagement. In the command center, Admiral Vexter stood in silence. His perfect protocols had failed. His proven strategies had crumbled. For the first time in his long career, he did not know what to do next. On Earth below, General Chen watched the alien fleet retreat on her screens. She allowed herself one moment of satisfaction before turning back to her staff. "That was just round one," she said. "They'll be back, and they'll be angry. They'll come with ground forces next because they can't trust their orbital attacks. Let's give them something to really be angry about." The war was just beginning, and humanity was not going to fight it the way anyone expected. The Kelari Council of War met aboard the flagship Eternal Victory, though after recent events, some officers privately thought the name should be changed to something less ironic. Admiral Vexter stood before the holographic images of the 7 highest-ranking commanders in the Dominion fleet. His 4 eyes were tired, and his normally proud posture had slumped. "Explain this failure," demanded Supreme Commander Drauketh. His image flickered slightly as it was transmitted from the Dominion homeworld, 3,000 light-years away. His voice was cold with barely controlled anger. Vexter took a deep breath. "The humans did not respond to our psychological warfare. When we attacked their cities, they did not submit. They made jokes about us. When we destroyed their military bases, we discovered they had hidden their weapons among civilian populations. They do not separate their warriors from their civilians." Hidden weapons among civilians. Another commander, Talvara, leaned forward. "That is a violation of the Galactic Combat Accords. It is dishonorable." "The humans have never signed the Galactic Combat Accords," Scholar Yemril said quietly from her corner of the room. "They do not know our rules of war. They have never met another species before us. They follow their own rules, developed over thousands of years of fighting each other." "And what rules are those?" Drauketh demanded. Yemril's old eyes looked sad. "Survival at any cost. The humans have a saying, 'All is fair in love and war.' They do not believe in honorable combat. They believe in winning. They believe that the only rule of war is that there are no rules." The council fell silent. In all their conquests, they had never faced an enemy who did not understand the basic protocols of warfare. Every species they had encountered played by similar rules. You gathered your forces, you announced your intentions, you identified military targets, and you fought until one side won. It was civilized. It was proper. It was how war was supposed to be conducted. The humans, it seemed, had missed that lesson entirely. "We have 340 ships remaining," Vexter said. "I propose we blockade the planet. No food, no supplies, no communication with the outside. We starve them into submission." "How long will that take?" Talvara asked. "According to our calculations, approximately 2 of their years, possibly 3. "Unacceptable," Drauketh said. "The Dominion cannot tie up a battle fleet for 2 or 3 years. There are other conquests to make, other species to bring under our rule. We need a faster solution." "Then we must invade," Vexter said. "Ground forces. Take their cities one by one. Our soldiers are superior to theirs in every way. Better weapons, better armor, better training. After what happened in orbit, they have hidden weapons everywhere. Our soldiers would be walking into traps constantly. We will use overwhelming force. 1 million soldiers. They cannot hide enough weapons to stop that many troops. We will flood the planet with our warriors until resistance becomes impossible." The council debated for hours, but in the end they agreed. The invasion would begin in 1 week. The Kelari would land their troops in multiple locations around the planet and crush the human resistance through sheer numbers. What they did not know was that the humans had intercepted every word of their transmission. In the underground command center, General Chen listened to the translation of the Kelari battle plans. A young technician named Private Alina Kowalski had cracked their communication codes in just 3 days, using a combination of advanced mathematics, pattern recognition software, and pure stubbornness. When asked how she did it, she had simply said, "They're predictable." Their codes follow patterns, just like everything else they do. 1 million soldiers, Colonel Wright said. That's a lot of aliens, General. It is, Chen agreed. But look at their plan. They're going to land in open fields outside major cities, large, clear areas where they can establish bases and organize their forces. Standard military doctrine. It's what we would do. Exactly. It's what anyone would do according to normal military thinking. Chen smiled, and there was no warmth in it, which is why we're not going to let them do it that way. Over the next week, humans across the planet worked without rest. They did not gather armies in the open. They did not build defensive walls around their cities. Instead, they did something the Kalari would never understand. They prepared to fight like humans. In every city, in every town, in every village, ordinary people learned to fight. Farmers who had never held a weapon learned to make explosives from fertilizer and diesel fuel. Factory workers converted their machines to produce weapons and ammunition. Computer programmers developed viruses to attack alien systems. Doctors prepared to treat wounds in hidden hospitals built in basements and warehouses. Teachers organized communication networks using old technology the aliens couldn't easily track. Grandmothers learned to use rifles. Children memorized escape routes. Shopkeepers stored weapons behind their counters. Every human became a potential soldier, and the aliens would never know which ones were dangerous until it was too late. And everywhere people made plans, not big, organized military plans, small, personal plans. Each person, each family, each neighborhood decided how they would resist. There was no central command giving orders to everyone. There was only a shared understanding. We will not surrender. We will fight until we win or until none of us are left. The Kalari landed on a Tuesday. Their dropships came down in perfect formation, just as their protocols demanded. They landed in the designated zones, established their perimeters, set up their communication equipment, and began to advance toward the nearest cities. Everything went according to plan. For about 3 hours. The first attack came near a small town in Kansas, in the heartland of the United States. A Kalari patrol of 50 soldiers was moving down a rural road when a farmer named Bill Henderson drove his tractor directly into their formation. The tractor was old and slow, and the aliens assumed it was just a civilian vehicle they could easily avoid. The tractor was loaded with explosives. Bill Henderson died that day, but he took 37 Kalari soldiers with him. His last words, transmitted over a radio to a nearby resistance cell, were simple: "Give them hell." Similar attacks happened everywhere on the planet. In China, a factory worker crashed a truck full of industrial chemicals into a Kalari supply depot, creating a toxic fire that burned for days. In Brazil, a group of fishermen used their boats to ram an alien landing craft, damaging it beyond repair. In Nigeria, a school teacher led her students into the hills and organized the first guerrilla cell of the war. In Russia, retired soldiers taught young people how to fight in the snow. In Australia, farmers used their knowledge of the harsh land to lead aliens into deadly traps. In Japan, subway workers used the underground tunnels to move fighters unseen beneath alien patrols. The Kalari commanders were confused. Their protocols covered organized military resistance. They knew how to fight armies, how to capture cities, how to break governments, but they had no protocols for fighting everyone. "They are all soldiers," Crenshaw reported to Admiral Vexter. "Every human, regardless of age or occupation, is fighting us. We cannot tell which ones are dangerous." That is impossible. No species has a military participation rate higher than 5%. Our models show. "Our models are wrong, Admiral. The humans do not have an army. They are an army, every single one of them." On the ground, Kalari soldiers began to fear something they had never experienced before: the unknown. In every battle before this, they knew what to expect. Enemies wore uniforms. Enemies carried obvious weapons. Enemies followed patterns that could be predicted and countered. But humans did not wear uniforms. The old woman walking down the street might be a harmless civilian, or she might have a bomb under her coat. The child playing in the ruins might be a scout for a resistance cell. The man offering to guide them through the city might be leading them into a trap. And the traps. The Kelari had never seen so many traps. There were pitfalls covered with thin wood and dirt. There were buildings rigged to collapse when someone stepped on the wrong floor tile. There were poisoned water supplies and false food caches that made soldiers sick. There were fake surrender flags that exploded when approached. There were tunnels that led nowhere except into ambushes where waiting humans killed patrol after patrol. The Kelari lost 10,000 soldiers in the first week of ground fighting, not to organized battles but to 1,000 small cuts. An attack here, an ambush there, a trap around every corner. No single attack was devastating, but together they bled, the invasion force dry. Commander Grixnell, who led the ground forces in Europe, sent a desperate message to the fleet. These humans do not fight like warriors. They fight like predators. They hunt us in our sleep. They strike without warning and vanish before we can respond. They are not soldiers. They are nightmares. Aboard the flagship, Admiral Vexter stared at the casualty reports. This was not war as he understood it. This was chaos, and his protocols had no answer for chaos. General Chen received reports from resistance cells around the world. Losses were heavy, but morale was high. The aliens were strong, but they were also confused. They did not understand what they were fighting. "Keep the pressure on," she ordered. "Don't let them rest. Don't let them adapt. And when they think they understand what we're doing, change tactics completely. Never be predictable. That's our greatest weapon." The humans called it asymmetric warfare. The Kelari called it madness. But madness, it seemed, was winning. 3 months into the ground war, the Kelari controlled less territory than they had on the first day. Their million soldiers had been reduced to 700,000, not through great battles but through attrition. A few deaths here, a few there, day after day, week after week. Death by 1,000 cuts. Admiral Vexter had stopped sleeping. His 4 eyes were red with exhaustion, and his mandibles clicked constantly with stress. Every report from the surface brought more bad news, more ambushes, more traps, more of his soldiers dying in ways that made no tactical sense. "We captured a human today," Commander Grixnell reported via hologram. His armor was scorched and there was blue blood on his uniform, not his own. An old female. She was hiding explosives in her home. She had been making bombs for months. "What intelligence did you gather from her?" "None, Admiral. She laughed at us. Even under interrogation, she just laughed and said we would never win. She said her grandchildren would dance on our graves." Grixnell paused. "Then she died. She had hidden poison in her tooth. She killed herself rather than tell us anything." Vexter felt something cold in his chest. "She killed herself rather than give us information." "Yes, Admiral, this is common. The humans would rather die than help us. They would rather destroy their own cities than let us have them. They would rather starve than accept our food. They are not rational beings." "No," Vexter whispered. "They are something worse. They are committed." Scholar Yemril had tried to warn him. She had said the humans were different. He had not listened because he had not wanted to believe it. Now, watching his army slowly bleed to death, he understood. The Kelari had conquered species that fought to protect their homes, species that fought for honor, species that fought because they had no choice. But the humans fought because they wanted to. They enjoyed it. Every small victory, every dead Kelari soldier, every burned alien supply ship brought them joy. They celebrated in their hiding places, shared stories of resistance, turned their fighters into heroes and legends. And for every human who died, 10 more seemed to take their place. Parents named their children after fallen resistance fighters. Old men who had never fought picked up weapons and went to war. The dead became inspiration for the living. On Earth, the resistance was growing stronger, not weaker. The Kelari had expected that casualties would break human morale. Instead, every death made the survivors angrier, more determined, more creative in their methods. General Chen sat in her underground command center, reading reports from around the world. The news was grim but not hopeless. The aliens controlled some territory, but they could not hold it. Every base they built was sabotaged. Every supply line was attacked. Every patrol was ambushed. And something else was happening, something the Kelari had not anticipated. "General," Colonel Wright said, "we're getting reports from occupied zones. The aliens are having trouble with their equipment." "What kind of trouble?" "Everything. Their vehicles break down, their weapons misfire, their communication devices fail, their food storage units spoil their rations." Wright almost smiled. "The civilians are sabotaging everything they can get their hands on." Chen nodded. "The factory workers?" "Yes, ma'am. Before the occupation, we sent word to every factory, every workshop, every maintenance facility. Anyone who had to work for the aliens was told to do their jobs badly. Missing bolts, crossed wires, tiny defects that take weeks to cause problems, sand in fuel tanks, wrong chemicals in battery cells. It was a strategy as old as human resistance. During Earth's own wars, occupied peoples had sabotaged their conquerors in exactly the same way. Factory workers in World War II had produced faulty ammunition. Mechanics had caused engine failures. Cooks had made conquerors sick. The Kelari had no experience with this kind of resistance. In their previous conquests, defeated populations had submitted completely. They had not continued fighting with wrenches and screwdrivers. "What about the psychological warfare campaign?" Chen asked. A young lieutenant named Tors pulled up data on his screen. "Going well, General. Our broadcasts are reaching their soldiers. We've translated our messages into their language using the code systems we cracked. And we're telling them the truth mostly, that they're dying far from home for nothing, that their leaders lied to them about how easy this war would be, that their families will never see them again, that this planet will be their grave." Tors paused. "And we're mixing in some lies too. Fake reports about rebellions on other Kelari worlds, stories about their emperor being sick, rumors about their government falling apart. Any indication it's working?" "We can't verify if they believe it, but our sources say morale in the alien forces is dropping fast. Some units have stopped leaving their bases. They're afraid of what's out there. They jump at shadows. They shoot at anything that moves, including each other sometimes." Chen leaned back in her chair. The Kelari had started this war with psychological attacks on humanity. Now humanity was returning the favor, and humans had a lot more experience with psychological warfare than the Kelari did. They had been manipulating each other's minds for thousands of years. But she knew this war was far from over. The aliens still had overwhelming firepower. They could, if they chose, simply destroy every city on Earth from orbit, burn the whole planet to ash. The only thing stopping them was their desire to conquer, not destroy. They wanted Earth's resources, Earth's technology, Earth's people as servants. "We need to change their minds about that," Chen said quietly. "Ma'am, they're not destroying us from orbit because they want to win. They want to conquer us, use us, make us part of their empire. We need to make them understand that they can never use us, that even if they win every battle, they lose the war." "How do we do that, General?" Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was hard. "We show them that the cost of conquering us will be everything they hope to gain. Every city they take will be ruins. Every resource they capture will be poisoned. Every human they try to enslave will fight until death." She looked at her officers. "We're not fighting to win this war in the traditional sense. We're fighting to make sure that even if we lose, they lose too. Total victory or mutual destruction. Those are the only options we give them." It was not a noble strategy. It was not heroic. It was simply human. The word went out to resistance cells around the world. Destroy everything. Leave nothing for the enemy. If they want Earth, they will get ashes. In the following weeks, the Kelari watched in horror as the humans began destroying their own world. Factories that could not be defended were burned to the ground. Dams were demolished, flooding farmland. Oil wells were set on fire. Power plants were sabotaged. Mines were collapsed. Bridges were blown up. Ships were sunk in harbors. They are destroying their own civilization, Commander Grixnell reported. Why? Why would any species do this? On the flagship, Admiral Vexter finally understood. The humans were not fighting to survive. They were fighting to make sure the Kelari would never benefit from their conquest. Even in defeat, they would deny their enemies any victory. It was the most terrifying thing he had ever seen. "Contact the Supreme Commander," he said quietly. "Tell him we need to discuss alternative strategies immediately." "What alternatives, Admiral?" Vexter stared at the burning planet on his screen. Cities in flames, poisoned rivers, collapsed infrastructure. "I do not know, but our current path leads only to a wasteland. Even if we kill every human on that world, we will have gained nothing but a dead rock. This conquest is becoming meaningless." For the first time in the history of the Kelari Dominion, an admiral was considering retreat. The message came from the Kelari flagship on a clear morning, transmitted on all frequencies so that every human on Earth could hear it. Admiral Vexter's face appeared on screens across the planet, his 4 eyes looking tired and defeated. "People of Earth," he said, his words translated by captured Kelari computers. "The Kelari Dominion requests a ceasefire to discuss terms." In bunkers and basements, in caves and tunnels, humans stopped what they were doing and listened. Some laughed with relief. Some cried with exhaustion. Some simply sat in stunned silence, unable to believe what they were hearing. General Chen watched the message in her underground command center. Her face showed no emotion. 6 months of war had taught her not to hope too easily. She had seen too many friends die, too many cities burn, too many desperate plans fail. "It's a trick," Colonel Wright said immediately. "They want us to lower our guard so they can strike again." "Maybe," Chen said, "but maybe not. Look at their fleet. They've lost almost 100 more ships to our space-based attacks. Their ground forces are down to 500,000, and half of those are wounded or sick or refusing to leave their bases. They're losing." "We're losing too, General. How many millions have we lost?" Chen closed her eyes briefly. The numbers were impossible to calculate exactly, but estimates put civilian casualties at over 100 million. The planet's infrastructure was in ruins. Entire cities had been destroyed, some by the Kelari, others by humans themselves in the Scorched Earth campaign. It would take generations to rebuild. "We're losing," she agreed. "But we can keep losing longer than they can. That's the difference. They came here to conquer a thriving world. What they're conquering is ruins. At some point, the cost becomes too high even for them." She ordered a response sent to the Kelari flagship. One word: talk. The negotiations took place on neutral ground, a small island in the Pacific Ocean that had somehow avoided destruction. General Chen led the human delegation, accompanied by representatives from every major nation that still had a functioning government. Admiral Vexter came alone, with only Scholar Yemrel as an advisor. They sat at a simple table under a blue sky that seemed impossibly peaceful after months of war. The ocean breeze carried the smell of salt, not smoke. For a long moment, neither side spoke. Finally, Vexter said, "We underestimated you." "Yes," Chen replied, "you did. Our protocols predicted that you would surrender after the first attacks. When you did not, they predicted you would break after we destroyed your military. When you did not, they predicted your civilian population would lose will after sustained ground combat." He paused. "Every prediction was wrong. We have never been so wrong about any species. Your protocols were designed for species that think like you do. We don't, we never have. Scholar Yemril leaned forward. If I may, General, I have studied your species extensively since this war began. I believe I understand now why our protocols failed, though I wish I had understood it sooner. Explain. Every species we have encountered has a breaking point, a level of suffering beyond which they cannot continue fighting. They surrender, they accept defeat, they become part of our empire. We have refined our warfare over 10,000 years to find that point quickly and efficiently. She paused. Humans do not have a breaking point. When you suffer, you do not break. You change. You adapt. You become something harder, something that can endure even more suffering. Chen nodded slowly. We have a saying, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. It's not just words, it's how we're built. It's in our nature. It is terrifying, Yemril admitted. No species should be able to endure what you have endured. No rational being should fight the way you fight. And yet here you are, still fighting, still laughing, still making your jokes and your songs. You sing about your dead and then go kill more of us. You attacked Tokyo 6 months ago, Chen said. Within a week, humans had written hundreds of songs making fun of you. Not because we weren't scared. We were terrified. But we turned our fear into humor because that's how we cope. When we can't control a situation, we mock it. When we can't defeat an enemy with strength alone, we defeat them by refusing to take them seriously. Admiral Vexter's mandibles clicked. This is why your psychological warfare affected our troops so deeply. We are not accustomed to being laughed at, to being mocked. It broke something in them. No one is accustomed to it. But humans have been laughing at death since we first developed language. Every culture on Earth has jokes about death, about disaster, about tragedy. It's how we survive what should destroy us. The negotiations continued for 3 days. Slowly, painfully, the outline of a treaty emerged. The Kelari would withdraw from Earth completely. In exchange, humanity would not pursue them into space. There would be no reparations, no revenge, no continued conflict. Both sides were too exhausted for anything else. But on the 3rd day, a complication arose. Our Supreme Commander has refused the treaty, Vexter announced, his voice heavy with frustration. He says the Dominion cannot be seen to retreat from a primitive species. It would encourage rebellion in our other conquered systems. It would make us look weak. Chen felt her heart sink. So the war continues. Unless we can offer him something, some way to present this as a victory or at least not as a defeat. General Chen thought for a long moment. Around the table, human representatives exchanged worried glances. They had come so close to peace. So many had died for this moment. Then an idea came to her. It was crazy. It was ridiculous. It was so human that the aliens would never see it coming. What if, she said slowly, the story wasn't about the Kelari retreating? What if it was about the Kelari discovering that humans are too dangerous to conquer? Vexter frowned. I do not understand. You came here to conquer us. You failed. But instead of admitting failure, you could say you learned something valuable. You could tell your Supreme Commander that humans are a threat to the entire galaxy. That leaving us alone isn't a retreat, it's a quarantine. It's protecting the Dominion from something that could destroy it. Yemril's eyes widened. You want us to make your species into a boogeyman, a warning to the rest of the galaxy. Why not? It's true, isn't it? You've seen what we do when someone attacks us. We don't surrender, we don't negotiate until we've made you bleed, we don't fight by any rules you understand. We just keep coming, no matter the cost. Is that really something you want to spread to the rest of your empire? What happens when your other conquered species start learning from us? Admiral Vexter stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he made a sound that might have been a laugh. You are proposing that we make you into a legend, the species that cannot be conquered, the world that must never be attacked. It protects both of us. Your Dominion saves face by painting us as too dangerous to bother with, and we get left alone, which is all we ever wanted. We never asked you to come here. We just want to live our lives. And in the future, when your species spreads beyond this one planet, when you build starships and venture into the galaxy." Chen smiled. "Then you'd better hope we stay friendly, because we're going to remember who tried to conquer us, and we're going to remember who was smart enough to leave us alone." The treaty was signed 1 week later. The Kelari withdrew from Earth, and Admiral Vexter delivered his report to the Supreme Commander. In it, he described humans as a chaos species, incapable of following normal patterns of warfare. He recommended that Earth be quarantined and left strictly alone for eternity. The report spread through the Kelari Dominion and from there to other spacefaring civilizations. Within a year, every intelligent species in the galaxy had heard of the humans, the primitive planet that had defeated the mighty Kelari, the species that laughed at death and fought without rules, the warriors who could not be broken because they did not know how to break. Some called humans monsters, some called them heroes, but everyone agreed on one thing: never attack Earth. 20 years later, a human ship made first contact with the Novari, one of the species previously conquered by the Kelari. The Novari captain trembled in fear when he saw the human vessel approaching. "Please," he transmitted, "we mean no harm. We are not your enemies. We surrender." The human captain, a young woman named Sarah Chen Jr., smiled at the message. Her grandmother had told her stories about the war, about how humans had become the most feared species in the galaxy through nothing but stubbornness and a really dark sense of humor. Grandma Sarah had died 5 years ago, but her granddaughter carried her name and her legacy. "We come in peace," she replied. "We're explorers, not conquerors. There's no need to surrender." The Novari captain took a long time to respond. When he did, his voice was shaking. "How can we believe you? The stories say humans are unpredictable, dangerous. They say you burned your own world rather than let the Kelari have it. They say you laughed as you died." Sarah laughed. It was a warm, friendly laugh, nothing like the mocking laughter that had terrorized Kelari soldiers decades ago. "The stories are true. We are unpredictable. You never know what we're going to do next." She paused, letting the alien worry for a moment. "But right now, what we're going to do is invite you for dinner. My cook makes amazing food, and I want to hear about your people. We've been alone in our little corner of the galaxy for too long. We're curious about everything out there." The Novari captain was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised her. "The stories also say that humans make good friends. Is that true?" Sarah smiled. "It's true. We're as loyal to our friends as we are dangerous to our enemies, maybe more. Would you like to find out?" It was the beginning of a new era. Humanity reached out to the stars not as conquerors, but as friends. They helped rebuild civilizations the Kelari had crushed. They shared technology, medicine, and culture. They showed the galaxy that the most terrifying species in existence could also be the most generous. And everywhere they went, humans kept being humans, unpredictable, chaotic, impossible to control or categorize. But also kind, also curious, also willing to laugh at themselves and the absurdity of existence. The Kelari had been right about one thing: humans did not follow expected patterns. But they had been wrong about why that was dangerous. Humans were dangerous because they could not be predicted. But they were also wonderful for exactly the same reason. In the end, the galaxy learned an important lesson. Never underestimate a species that makes jokes about its own destruction. Because if they can laugh at death, they can survive anything. And if they can survive anything, maybe they're worth knowing after all. The Kelari war protocols remained in the Dominion archives, studied by military historians as an example of how not to fight a war. Beside them, scholars placed a new document, human communication samples. It was full of jokes, memes, songs, and terrible puns. Future generations of Kalari officers were required to study these documents, not to learn how to defeat humans, but to understand why it was impossible, and why trying would be the biggest mistake any species could make. And sometimes, late at night when no one was watching, young Kalari officers would read the human jokes and find themselves laughing despite themselves. They did not tell anyone. It would be embarrassing to admit. But secretly, they wondered what it would be like to know a species that could laugh at the universe itself. Because in the end, laughter was humanity's greatest weapon, and like all great weapons once unleashed, it could not be taken back. The galaxy would never be the same. And humanity, as always, thought that was pretty funny.